5-point plan to define business requirements for ERP selection. I'm Jonathan Gross. I'll be your moderator today. With me is John Toney, one of our senior consultants here at Pemeco Consulting. This year is the first in a series of 3 webinars on how to deliver successful ERP selection projects. In next week's webcast, we're going to discuss how to create an appropriate long list of ERP vendors. We're going to talk about how to manage the procurement process, how to draft customized RFPs, how to shortlist ERP vendors from the long list, and how to manage effective demonstrations. The following week, April 18th, we're going to get into detail about how to negotiate ERP contracts with a view to lowering total cost of ownership, accelerating return on investment, and incentivizing the various parties, including vendors and service providers, to deliver successful ERP projects. To learn more, visit www.pemeco.com/webinars. After introducing our firm and today's presenters, John and I are going to walk you through our 5-point plan to effectively define business requirements. We're going to talk about the first point, and that's how to align IT and business and create a foundation for business transformation. Then we're going to move into the second point, and we're going to talk about how to manage and plan the assessment. We're then going to progress to point 3 and discuss analyzing the as-is business state, following which we're going to talk about how to design the to-be state. And then we're going to conclude with a discussion on scheduling ERP selection phases. By way of brief background, Pemeco Consulting has been around since 1978. We have 4 primary service areas. They are business assessments, and our business assessment services typically include feasibility studies, so whether or not, for example, it makes sense to pursue an ERP project, whether these projects can be tolerated in terms of the amount of change and cost and so forth. We do assessments intended to help companies define business requirements for ERP selection purposes. We do assessments for companies that are acquiring or merging with other companies, and these types of assessments typically focus on whether or not businesses can be integrated technologically and operationally. We also do implementation audits to determine whether implementations have been successful, whether those that are in process are on the road to success, and so forth. We also do ERP vendor selection, and we manage selection projects for multinational companies, divisions of multinationals, and companies in the small and medium-sized business space. Our methodology for vendor selection and business assessments forms part of a curriculum of an upper-level MBA course at Canada's #1 ranked MBA school, the Schulich School of Business at York University. We also specialize in ERP implementation management, and our firm has achieved over the years what we think is an unparalleled success rate. Our methodology is published, and our book sells in more than 40 countries. And our methodology is used by ERP vendors themselves, by resellers of ERP software, by end-user companies, and by our competitors as well. And our last service area is the post-implementation optimization area. And this service is aimed at helping companies realize the value that was promised to them in the initial ERP business case that justified the investment in the first place. Here is a sampling of our market-leading client base. And we typically serve businesses across North America, so that's the United States, Mexico, and Canada, although we do some overseas work. Our client base is largely comprised of manufacturing, distribution, and service companies. We do serve retail as well. Our clients include well-known industry leaders, as well as leaders that excel in certain niche markets. The client, for example, in the top row, Tokyo Electron, has been with us for close to a decade. The company is an $8 billion Japanese manufacturer that is number 2 in its market share for the manufacture of semiconductor production equipment. We've been managing their assessments and selection and implementation projects, like I said, for about a decade now. In terms of our assessment business, this is what the CEO and chairman, I should now say former CEO and chairman of Frisco Bay Industries, a division of Stanley Tool, says. And just in terms of who Frisco Bay is, they make ATM machines. And what the CEO and then chairman said, planning and control are crucial to a company's survival. By working with Pemeco, we satisfied our need for a complete professional and unbiased analysis, one that was developed on schedule, within budget, and implemented equally with precision. And the important point to note here is the word unbiased. We are impartial towards vendors. We have worked with more than 30 systems, and we do not make money from ERP vendors. We strictly work with end-user companies, and our revenues are tied to our successful delivery of projects. And I'll point to one more reference, and this is from the Senior Vice President of Strategic Planning at a multinational company called Automated Packaging Systems. And he says, Pemeco provided structure to the myriad of complex problems with a clear set of prioritized objectives, associated strategies, and a roadmap to get them done. Not only do their very serious consultants know business processes, they are extremely adept communicators and managers. Pemeco's skills in strategic planning and operations streamlining, as well as their in-depth knowledge of software, made them an ideal choice to lead the audit. I question if we could have found this combination elsewhere. Now, our speakers today are myself and John Toney. John, perhaps you could introduce yourself to the audience.
Greetings, folks. This is John Toney. I'm a senior consultant with Pemeco. I have in excess of 23 years in large consulting firms, including Coopers & Lybrand, Pricewaterhouse, Booz Allen. I've done work for Deloitte and Ernst & Young as an independent consultant also. And that career has been split pretty much evenly between business process reengineering, manufacturing lean concepts, and actually doing ERP assessments and implementation work for a large variety of clients using multiple different systems off the shelf.
Thanks, John. And I'm Jonathan Gross. I lead Pemeco's assessment and selection practice areas. I run these projects for companies of all sizes. And I also teach our methodology at the Schulich School of Business at York University. I'm an attorney by training, and I leverage that expertise to help our clients, first of all, manage fair and equitable procurement processes, and to draft RFPs and negotiate industry-leading ERP terms and conditions. Let's move into today's presentation and start with point 1, a foundation for transformation, aligning corporate objectives, operations, and information technology. Now, different businesses have different corporate objectives. Some might measure themselves by market share, others might measure themselves by profits, and others might measure themselves by revenues. Some might look at performance on a corporate level on a yearly basis, 2 years, they may have 5-year plans. Regardless of the goals, and regardless of the particular drivers of business, an ability to meet those corporate objectives ultimately becomes a question of operational execution. And this, in turn, brings to bear the interplay among people, business processes, technologies, and business models. Now, I want to stop here for 1 second because it's important to mention that none of these people, processes, technologies, and models operate in a vacuum. And each is necessarily and inseparably connected to the others. So when we talk about ERP and the related benefits, what we're really talking about is a business transformation. And we're talking about a transformation characterized by opportunities enabled by ERP technologies. And opportunities lie in a company's ability to make people and processes more efficient, more effective, and more productive. Just by way, again, of brief background, ERP provides this opportunity through, for example, business process automation and the reduction of error-prone and time-consuming human interactions. It provides other opportunities through reporting and business intelligence so people can make more effective and timely decisions based on more current data. And it provides an opportunity to manage risk through automated security settings and approval requirements and so forth. Now, the key for any company is to determine how it wants its organization to look in a future ERP state. And to do that, we have to drive from the corporate goals, and we have to understand what the strategies and the growth objectives are. We have to understand the business models, and we have to understand where we are today, where we want to be tomorrow, and where we want to be 5 years from now. We need to understand how our business structure plays into this, and we have to take into account our geographies and divisional requirements, our departments and their functions, our organizational structure, the people and the technologies that support them, and the financial and regulatory constraints that govern the way we have to operate. And then finally, we have to execute. And within that context of corporate goals and structure, we have business processes, the IT architecture, and the people necessary to serve and support our business. Once we've defined how we want our organization to look tomorrow and in 5 years from now, we're in a position to deliver what we intended to do. Now, if we back that up to ERP and what that means, it means that we've got to look forward at our business and figure out not just at a conceptual level where we want to be, but because ERP operates at the process level, because it enables and supports decision-making, we've got to define with specificity what functionality it is we require. We have to understand what technology we need and we should use to support that. We have to figure out whether or not the investment makes sense, whether our metrics are return on investment, internal rate of return, some form of risk. Well, that's what we have to measure. And an ERP system is only going to be beneficial if it's something that's used by the people, so we have to be in a position to assess the extent to which our people, the people on the floor, the people in the office, are going to be able to navigate through the systems. And finally, we have to be able to assess what our reporting needs are in terms of timeliness, data, and analysis. With that overview, I'm going to pass the lead to John, and John's going to walk us through how to plan and manage an assessment project.
Good afternoon again, folks. And we can flip down here to the next slide.
John, maybe you'll guide me. I'm not sure if the controls are passing.
No, we're there. We're there. Okay. Basically, we're going to start off talking about the overall assessment. There's a project structure that we like to have in place, and in driving to the startup of the project, we're looking for a steering committee, a core team of your best and brightest resources, a clear definition of their specific roles and responsibilities. relative to the assessment, with the thought going forward that these will probably be the key players in a selection, analysis, and implementation project ultimately. We want a clear definition of scope. You know, why are we doing this project? What are the strategic objectives of it? And how are we going to measure this project going forward? And then ultimately we get down to the planning process, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, which is obviously the specific schedule of the events, the critical events in the assessment, the definition of the required resources at each level, and then what the budgets are pertaining to that. And I apologize, these tabs are run. There we go. From the assessment itself, and if you take what we consider basically a pre-implementation schedule, you'll start, our schedules tend to run anywhere from a 5 to 6 month time frame. That seems lengthy to some people, but the kickoff and assessment will go fairly quickly. Once we get into having accomplished everything within the assessment element, then we go into the long listing, RFPs, demonstrations, and we put a lot of emphasis on long listing and short listing the vendors and actually getting the demos structured to where they reflect your business. We believe in having on-site visits by the vendors. We want that demonstration process to be as meaningful as possible. Contract negotiations were probably a little more time-consuming with us, but that's because we expect you to get more bang for the buck using us within the contract negotiations. We actually insist on elements from the vendors themselves pre-demo to where we're actually asking them for contractual commitments to even allow them into the demo process. And most vendors, good vendors, don't have a problem with that. Okay, sample some of the key assessment topics that we're going to look at. And again, this reflects a little bit on what Jonathan had talked about, but you know, the overall structure around this is starting with your corporate objectives. We're going to look at your business models and the performance, good, bad, or indifferent, what your departmental business processes are, how they're broken out, what the IT architecture is that supports that, what kind of human capital do you have, what's your capacity, what's the skill sets, and then we'll look at the project schedules and budgets. Now, if you look at the actual assessment itself, it's fairly quick. Project kickoff, we'll look at the strategies. Now, it may stretch out longer than this if we're doing multi-division, multi-site. This is principally for a single site. Looking at the organizational structures and geographies, looking at what your IT architecture is. We like to take on a single site. It's a 2 to 3 day process for us to go through your business processes, look at what your tactical reporting capabilities are. Again, this is a single site. Now, once we have done that, we do draft the assessment, and I believe that's supposed to be team review. There's a vetting process that we go through as part of the assessment before we even go into the 2B workshops and look at other options for what we need to do relative to moving forward in the project. Okay, if you look at the, and basically this is a daily task Gantt chart. Within the business model definition, you know, we'll spend an hour looking at the different elements that were within your business. We try and do a 3-tier analysis on the items that we look at. Once we've gotten through that initial assessment, which is this is a snapshot of your business at the geography level, at the staffing level, at the overall business process level, then we want to go look at your as-is state. And a lot of people say, well, why do you need to look at my as-is? We're looking forward. Back in the 80s, software companies tried to come in and say, hey, our software is best practices. All you have to do is put it in, and your operations are immediately going to be better. Well, we can't force a software solution on your business. We want to look at your business from the top down, inside out, every way we can to find the hidden gems in your business that make you successful and make sure that we leverage those and if we can, even improve upon those as we go along. So basically, you know, the purpose of the as-is mapping from a relative standpoint, is to document the needs relating to your reporting, what your business processes needs are from a technology perspective, given to support the business right now, and then what your human capital, what your people element of the equation is also. We will look at what's critical, what's non-negotiable requirements. You may have regulatory issues relative to your business that have to be capitulated within the solution. And specifically, we're really looking heavily at gaps, issues, and opportunities. As I talked about in my background earlier, I'm a former senior manager in the just-in-time manufacturing practice for Coopers & Lybrand, and I was a national director for the business process reengineering practice for another firm. I've worked with 3 separate methodologies over my career on finding and delivering bottom-line value to clients. So we're going to use those skills, and a lot of our consultants have those skills. We're going to use those skills to try and help you improve your ROI and your business performance, not just relative to the ERP, but to the operations that are being supported by the ERP system as well. Now, when we do our analysis, we do actually 3 levels of analysis when we go through the as-is. This is a value chain. The value chain is a high-level look at your business on where you're creating value. It's relative to your customers, to your vendors, where you store your product. This is basically the value stream and our high-level analysis that we do. We take this then, and we're going to want to drill down within those areas. And you saw back in there that for last slide, one of them was in the warehousing area, and this is basically a breakout. This happens to be one of our maquiladora clients with the joint Mexican-U.S. operations. And here we take the actual receiving of goods and processing through the warehouse. This is bringing it down to a process analysis level. And then beyond that, looking at another element, this is going to give you the IT architecture technical map, if you will, of what a company's operations look like. So we're going to do this analysis at 3 different levels: the value of your business, the detailed business processes that are critical to your business, and the technical map of where your business is right now. One of the other things I talked about just a minute ago is where we talk about a gap analysis. If you look at this actual process flow and the process summary below, and these are the types of these are deliverables out of some of our client cases. This particular process has 2 client personnel in it. Every red box that you see is a human touch point. It's a human activity occurring, and there's no systemic support internal to this system. There is a Lawson system, but it's basically they're releasing orders to the Lawson system. Now, once we go through and do these types of analysis, we'll look at that process, and these are just some sample solutions we've done for other clients. The observations that come out of that initial as-is, and this is us stepping back and say, hey, as your business consultants, these are the things that we're observing in your business. 60% of your customer service time is being spent on order inquiries, customers calling in, checking on their orders. What's the impact of that to your business? Poor customer service utilization, and probably suspect customer responsiveness. And then we look at what are potential options. Maybe we need a customer portal where the customers can check online on their own orders. Maybe maybe they're calling for price list updates, so we do a daily email price list. Or maybe 80% of what they're doing, what they're asking for, could be handled through a simple automated phone service. I know we all hate those phone services, but they're there for a reason. And if we look at that and we consider those options, we're going to estimate to you, and we do this very conservatively, that there's a financial impact there of 50% of the people in your customer service area times 60% of their ineffectiveness. That's effectively providing you a 30% opportunity within the customer service area. The second item is frequent changes to customer orders, and this gets more into your schedule volatility, potential customer alienation. You can have lost orders, inventory and cash flow issues, and solution options. It may be a scheduling and planning issue. We may just need an integrated real-time planning system. And the financial impacts are setup, time costs, increased factory throughput. Again, these are just samples of the types of issues, the types of things that we will provide you as we go through the as-is portion of the analysis. Now, once we get to the as-is, obviously the next step is, where are we going to take the solution? What does the future need to look like? Okay? So we've done the kickoff and assessment. We've done the as-is analysis. We've also come out of the as-is analysis and we talked about the people element of your business, which is really critical because so many companies nowadays that have never used these types of systems before are stepping up to it and understanding that they really need to be in this game. And there's an ERP training element frequently, or there's process training that needs to occur. We will assess that as part of the as-is assessment that we do, and we will also help you plan for the future state design, which will provide us the foundation for what our ERP selection process is going to be. And we like to do that in workshops where we actually have the critical players in the room. We talk about how your business operates, what your business needs are. We look at the as-is analysis, the observations, and we start playing what if. You know, can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? Can we apply technology here? And what we're looking for is the optimum solution for your particular business. Now, we had that flow chart earlier, and then once after we've done the 2B, that the flow chart that we had earlier that showed 11 human procedures, with the introduction of an executable order system on that same process, we've now taken this down to 1 person, 2 procedures, and 9 of those process steps have now been systemically supported, so that we only have 2 human touch points instead of 11 human touch points. Again, these are samples of what we actually deliver to clients. Now, once we do that throughout all of these, this is again from another client, actually a recent one that Jonathan and I were at, we're going to come back and give you the estimate on, in this particular client, QC processing was a 40% reduction. The numbers there represent the level of effort compared to the as-is. So in most cases, in this particular case, we were in a 45 to 50% reduction level as far as the human touch points required in their different business processes that we looked at. Now, once we've looked at those types of elements and we've actually done some analysis, we will actually provide you, and I'm, again, my background is to do this extremely conservatively, but we're going to come into reporting, materials management, and give you specific elements of where we think you can save cost. And in this one particular client, we identified $8.85 million worth of cost reduction or savings opportunities related to either the introduction of technology, improvement in their business processes. So that kind of gets you through the as-is, why we do it, how we do it, and the 2B and what we're going to deliver to you prior to actually going into licensing, selection, and that type of thing. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jonathan now and let him take you through some of the other elements of what we do after we finish the 2B.
Thanks, John. So as John said, what we've gotten to at this point is we've taken a look at the as-is, we've identified opportunities for benefit and where technology might enable those benefits or support improvements. To the extent that we can do it, we've put some quantification to it. Obviously, one thing we have to understand here is this is not a simple dollars and cents equation. For many of our clients and for many businesses in general, there is non-quantifiable risk. If we have an aged server, an aging server that's towards the end of its useful life that our operations are running on and it's stored in a broom closet, well, we have disruption risks there. Yeah, you can put numbers to it, but it doesn't matter. If the lights go out, your business won't be shipping orders. So obviously there are other risks that have to be balanced against the ones that are quantified. Another example that we commonly come across is where there are insufficient controls in the systems. In other words, people have an ability to not only look at data they're not supposed to be looking at, they have an ability to edit that data and to change it. So we've got all kinds of governance issues and data risks and exposures there. So that's all baked in as well. So once we've identified these opportunities for benefit, we're now in a position to start looking at the cost side of the equation, and ultimately that's going to lead us down the path of, hey, does the investment make sense or not, given our quantifiable and non-quantifiable risks, benefits, and costs, and so forth. When we start projecting ERP costs, first of all, we have to make it clear that we're projecting here. We haven't invited any vendors to participate, so all we can do is provide a range based on our data, our dealings with vendors, and our experience. So we look at capital costs, and if we're thinking about an on-premise ERP system, those are typically in the form of license costs. If we're thinking about SaaS, well, there aren't license acquisition costs. Rather, there's a recurring operating expense in the form of a subscription cost. Other capital costs that we would want to consider are any incremental IT hardware and infrastructure, and implementation and associated training. We look at operating costs, so if we decide that we want our client, or if our clients decide they want their systems hosted elsewhere because they don't want the risk of having to manage IT, they're in the business of manufacturing widgets and not in the business of keeping server lights on, so to speak, well, we look at recurring managed service costs to ensure uptime and system availability. When software is acquired, there is ongoing maintenance and support costs, same with hardware, and that entitles companies to bug fixes, help desks, upgrades, version changes, and so forth. I want to stop here for 1 second because there's a common misconception that when companies are looking at software as a service, maintenance and support costs don't apply. Well, it is true on some level that some of the maintenance and support services are baked into the subscription fees, but many of the SaaS vendors do charge maintenance and support as a percentage of subscription costs for additional support and maintenance. So it's worth, if you're looking at a SaaS alternative, it's worth asking the question, is there any incremental maintenance and support costs, and what am I getting for those dollars? And obviously salary costs. Will you need a business analyst that you didn't have before? Are you going to need a database administrator, an IT hardware person, and so forth? So all of those should be baked into the costs. And once we've figured out what the cost components are, we're in a position to model various scenarios, again, using a range at this point, low end and high end, because we simply don't know what solution is being proposed. So we now have the benefits, we now have the costs, and we're in a position to project, again, as John said, conservatively, what the ROI is and the payback and the internal rate of return or whatever happens to be important to our clients, and we chart those benefits and where they can expect to have a payback and by how much. So that's taken us through a big part of the assessment, and to recap where we are now, you will want to have your business assessed. You want to map your as-is state and your opportunities and challenges and gaps and issues, and you'll want to plan what your organization should look like if it wants to hit its strategic targets. Now, I see a couple of questions have come in. So John, I'm going to bounce these over to you. The first one seems to be a bit more technical, and it says, the process maps you're presenting look sophisticated. If we want to map our own processes, do we need a fancy business processing modeling software?
No, I don't, not necessarily. People use all different types of tools. And quite honestly, doing that prior to a firm like Pemeco coming on board, it is a very high value add process if you have the time and the resources to do it. But the answer on the tool itself is no. Whatever works for you, Visio's not hard to use. There are all kinds of technical mapping tools out there. But just the thought of going through that for your company is very beneficial because it's got you thinking in process mode. Excuse me. It also gives you a baseline document to provide to the consultants coming in that can get them up to speed on your processes much more quickly.
John, I want to segue on that question because the idea of process mapping is something we hear a lot about, obviously, and you know that as well. So one of the questions we get is, well, we've done process maps for ISO certification purposes. Are those sufficient?
Not normally, because they're ISO specific and they're not systems, process, people, process, technology, integrated specific. I guess you can flip this. You can take the process maps that are developed as part of an ERP selection process, and it'll probably make great documentation for you in your ISO documentation, but generally the ISO documentation does not provide good documentation from an ERP perspective. A lot of it because it lacks the technology element, the architecture element that we so desperately need.
Thanks, John. And there's just one more question before we move on to transitioning from the assessment and analysis phase to selection, and that is this. Mapping a future state seems to imply certain competencies. What types of expertise do we need?
Well, I think the biggest thing for us, and I assume we mean what type of expertise does the client need?
Correct.
The biggest thing you bring to the table is the understanding of your business and your business strategies looking forward. That's one of the reasons why you use a consultant. I've been in 300 plants in my career. I've worked with a vast variety of anywhere from restaurants to aircraft manufacturers to our job is to lead you towards a solution that will optimize your business. And I think what we rely heavily on from you is a good knowledge of your business and a good concept of strategically where you want the business to go.
So I think a fair answer.
And then have an open mind as we go through it. It's a little bit of an iterative process where we're not going to come in and just say, here's your solution all wrapped up in a bow. We're going to talk through it. We're going to make sure that you understand the risk and the benefits of each element in the 2B as we go through it. It's going to be your solution with our help guiding you hopefully in the right direction.
Well, that's actually a really important point because the consultants don't own this project. You, the company, owns this project. And so consultants can come in and they can bring to you best practices in terms of operations, whether it's lean or just-in-time or Six Sigma and so forth, and they can bring you best practices in terms of ERP and what systems can do. But ultimately, the decision about how your business is going to be structured is yours. And so, as John said, we're there oftentimes as facilitators. And that brings me back to the point that John was talking about, education. And the education during the assessment phase, when we're going from as-is to 2B, if the company doesn't have that fundamental knowledge, should take it then, because they have to be in a position to say, well, now that I understand what ERP can do, and now that I understand, how we can optimize our processes, this is what works best for our company. So for mapping the 2B, it's important, but then when we flow through to the selection project, and I'm going to get to that in just a minute, the core team, the users, the steering committee are the ones who are going to have to make the final decision on an ERP package. And so they need to have the requisite understanding of what an ERP system can and can't do and how it should handle their future processes. And so to be in a position to do that type of assessment and evaluation, they need a certain baseline understanding. And so again, that's why the education is important. It's a really important change management tool because the users during demonstrations have to be in a position to understand what they're looking at and compare and contrast the various solutions. So at the end of the assessment, when you've mapped your processes and you've budgeted your system based on whatever your value analysis is, you need to plan how you're going to manage the selection project. And from our experience, these selection phases usually take between 3 and 5 months to do and to do effectively. There is a due diligence component when we're putting together an appropriate long list of vendors. There is drafting, and again, you know, we have methodologies and we have certain best practices, but the idea here is to customize the process to your business. And that means customizing the RFP and the terms of engagement. When you're preparing an RFP workbook, well, there are a lot of companies out there that go on the web and download spreadsheets of ERP requirements. And to me, that seems like saying, well, here's a list of what ERP can do, and let's see how well we can fit into those buckets. We advocate a different position. We recommend that we take your business and your future business requirements and make the ERP vendor respond to that. We have these detailed process maps and reporting requirements and so forth, and instead of trying to fit your business into a solution, we like to see how well the solution will fit your future vision for your business. And so we prepare an RFP workbook based on the assessment. And the demonstrations are the same thing. And what you're going to hear next week is when we're scripting demonstrations with you, we are using your day-in-the-life business scenarios, your reports, your data, and your future processes and critical requirements. And so and this takes time from a scheduling perspective. The vendors require time in order to learn your business and figure out the extent to which their software is capable of meeting your business requirements. It takes them time to put demonstrations together because, again, they're not showing you a canned demonstration. They're showing you how well their software responds to your actual business requirements. And so, again, from assessment all the way to the end of selection, including contract negotiations, you're probably looking anywhere between a 3 and a 6 month project, sometimes longer. We've done them shorter, but seldom, and there are all kinds of iterations. But again, your requirements are going to determine the extent of the selection project, and that has to be figured out on a case-by-case basis. So just to recap where we've come today, and we've covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time. We've talked about aligning IT and business and developing a foundation for transformation. We've discussed how to plan and manage the assessment project. We've talked about analyzing the as-is state and the gaps and the issues and the opportunities there, as well as the critical requirements. We've talked about what goes into designing the to-be state and scheduling ERP selection. And so that leads into next week's webcast, doing due diligence on the ERP vendors themselves. And we're going to talk about everything that I just mentioned, from long listing all the way through to demonstrations. You can register by clicking this link here if you haven't already done so. Alternatively, you can visit our site at www.pemeco.com/webinars. We hope to see you next week. And I'm going to open it up to any more questions. John, here's a question for you.
Okay.
From a budgeting perspective, how much do ERP licenses cost in general? Well, that's a tough one. Can you answer that in the abstract?
It's all over the place. You do more of the contract work than I do on these deals. You may be able to get a closer estimate on that than I can even, Jonathan.
Yeah, and I'm hesitant to answer that question. without knowing your requirements, the way ERP vendors price, they price on the basis of capacity. They price on the basis of module requirements, the capacity being number of users, module requirements being the extent of functional needs. They price on how attractive your company is to them. If you are going to be a so-called anchor tenant or a key reference for them, there are too many variables to be able to answer that question effectively. But we will talk about pricing in more detail and the components of pricing when we get to the contract negotiations webinar in 2 weeks from now. So with that, we're going to conclude, and what I'd like to do is invite you to talk to either John or me or someone else at our firm about your project, about your selection project and assessments and so forth. We're available. And if any of you happen to be in the wine and spirits production and wholesaling business, well, we hope to see you in Orlando. We're going to be doing the keynote session for the 70th annual conference at the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers Association of America at the end of the month. So again, if anyone is on this call is going to be at that session, please send me an email, and I look forward to meeting you in person then. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you next week.